Okay, now let's look at the problem number 39. A man pushing a mop across the floor causes it to undergo two displacement. So the first has the magnitude of 150 centimeters, makes an angle of 120 with a positive x-axis. The resultant displacement has a magnitude of 140 centimeters and is directed at an angle of 35 degrees to the positive x-axis. Find the magnitude and direction of the second displacement. Now, let's first draw coordinate system, draw those vectors, and then we can understand it better and we can solve it easily. Now, okay, so let me draw the coordinate system. This is our x, this is our y. Now, we know that the first vector has a magnitude of 150 centimeter, and that makes angle 120 with positive x. So let's say that it's let's call this one as a vector. Now a vector has a magnitude, so a vector has a magnitude of 150 centimeters, and angle is this one. Let's call it theta. Okay, theta is equal 120 degrees. Okay, now then we have a resultant vector which has a magnitude 140 centimeters and directed at an angle 35 degrees. So let's say it's this one. Let's call this one a resultant vector. Okay, this resultant vector makes an angle of, let's call it alpha, which is equal to 35 degrees. Now we have to find a second vector, okay, which is b vector. We don't know exactly where it's located, but we can find by the formula, which is r vector is equal a vector plus b vector. Okay, now from here we have to find a b vector. B vector is r vector minus a vector. Again, if you want to find the components of b vector, which is bx and by, first of all you have to find the components of r vector and a vector. Okay, let's find those components. Now, how can we find r a component and r b component? So r a component will be equal to r, rx component. Rx component will be equal to r multiplied to cosine alpha, and our ry component is equal r multiplied to the sine alpha. So let's plug the numbers. So r is equal 140 multiplied cosine alpha, which is 35 degrees. Okay, so if you do calculation, you should find that your rx is equal 115. Okay, let's keep the units for later on, centimeters. Now let's find ry component, which is 140 centimeters multiplied to the sine 35 degrees, which should give you 80.3 centimeters. Okay, now let's find for the components for the a vector. So ax vector, ax component will be equal to a multiplied to the cos theta, which is a is equal, in our case, 150 multiplied to the cosine 120 degrees. If you do calculation, you can find it's equal minus 75. Now ay component a multiplied to the sine theta, which is 150 multiplied sine 120 degrees. If you do calculation, you can find that your AY component is equal to 130. Okay, now we found our RX and RY, AX and AY components. Let's find now the B vector. So B vector is equal to R vector, in our case, is equal 115 I vector. Ry is equal 80.3 J vector minus our A vectors are equal, AX is equal minus 75 I vector plus 130 J vector. Okay, so if you do calculation, you should find that your B vector is equal to 190 I vector, because I vector has to be added to the I vector, J vector has to be added to the J vector. So I vector is equal 190 I. Your J vector is equal to minus 49.7 J vector. Okay, now how can you find the magnitude? So the magnitude of the B vector is equal to, using the Pythagorean theorem, 190 squared plus 49.7 squared, which should give you 196 centimeters. Okay, now then how can you find the angle? So theta is equal inverse tangent by divided by bx. Okay, by in our case is equal minus 49.7 and bx is equal 190. Okay, if you do calculation, you will find that your theta is equal minus 14.7 degrees. Now we have to draw our vector, okay, so that it can be more clear, and we can also know from which angle we have to subtract minus 14.7. So 14.7. So how are we going to draw it? Now let's draw our B vector here. So our B vector has X component, which is about 119, right? So let's say it's this one is BX component. Okay, I have to draw it longer. BX component was equal 190. Then BY component is minus 49.7, right? It has to draw here, okay, which is BY is minus 49.7. So our resultant vector has to be from 0 up to here. Okay, this is our B vector. Now the angle is equal to the minus, or angle is equal 14.7. So this is our angle. Let's call it a beta, okay? So this beta will be equal 14.7, okay? Or if you want to find from the positive x, then you can say that your gamma is equal 360 degrees, because you have to take whole this angle, okay, from positive x up to here. 360 degrees minus 14.7 degrees. Okay, you do calculation. If you do calculation, your gamma is equal to 360 minus 14.7, which gives you 345 degrees. Okay, now obviously this b vector has to be transferred. Okay, so b vector has to be transferred here, so it has to move up. So when you move it up, your b vector has to be connected to this one. Okay, this is how you find it. So that means your, in this case, your beta vector is this one. Okay, beta angle. So b vector. Okay, this is how you find the solution.